Episode 3 is called Burning Down the House. And we open up the episode and we meet Bo. And Bo is in Alaska. Well, technically his name is James, but they kept referring to him as Bo. So we meet Bo. He's living in Alaska. He's talking to us about how he didn't have the best relationship with his family. So in 1997, he moved to Colorado and he joined the military, specifically the Army. We then end up meeting a guy named Christian. He is on the phone with his mom. Her name is Tammy. And they're just having this conversation. And it's a pretty normal conversation. We find out that Christian is expecting his first child with his significant other. And like I said, the conversation is pretty normal. Then he gets off the phone with the mom and he said, Bo taught me to keep my friends close and my enemies closer. And he said, that is what I'm doing with my mom. And I said, oh. So the mama is the issue. I said, not the mom being the issue. So like I said, in 1997, Bo, or James, aka Bo, moves to Colorado, and he joins the military. While he's in the military, he meets his commanding officer named Rich. We find out that Rich is Christian's father and Tammy's husband, and Rich was the commanding officer of Bo's unit, and everyone liked Rich. They all really enjoyed him. They all admired him. They said that he was the true definition of a leader, and he was always stressing the fact that the military is your job and you should have a life outside of this because eventually it won't be there anymore. And people just really loved Rich. So in 2001, Rich decides to retire from the military and, just become like a true blue family man, and everyone noticed that he seemed to be so happy with his family, with Tammy and with Christian. Now, during Father's Day weekend, he ends up passing away. It was around June the 18th, 2001. He was pretty much complaining about his throat hurting and just feeling very lethargic and uncomfortable. And he decides to go to the doctor's office and they said, oh, it's strep. And so when he passed away at 28, everybody was like, you just, like, a healthy 28-year-old is not just dying from strep throat. Like, what's going on? And it really, his death really made a lot of people distraught. A lot of people were grieving over him because of how great of a person he was. The episode then introduces us to Joyce, who is Rich mom, and she just talks about Tammy and Rich's relationship. They were married for 7 years. Joyce did not like Tammy. She pretty much said Tammy was too materialistic for her. She said when they first met Tammy, all Tammy could do was talk about how they had all this nice stuff in their home. And pretty much it sounded like Tammy was casing the joint, trying to figure out what she could steal. But she basically was like, Tammy really didn't seem like interested in her son specifically. She was just interested in what her son could do for her. And Joyce also brought up the fact that Rich and Tammy really didn't know each other. So she didn't understand why they needed to get married so quickly, but they did get married. So when he passed away, she kind of had her eyes on Tammy, more so with the fact that Tammy never told her initially when Rich passed away. She actually found out by her co-workers telling her that he had died, and that pissed her off, which is understandable. She also was looking at Tammy kind of funny because Rich was already planning to divorce Tammy, and then 2 weeks later he passed away. And basically the reason why Rich wanted to divorce Tammy was because he couldn't satisfy her materialistic hunger. He was always giving her stuff. Whatever she asked, he always gave it to her, but she never was satisfied with it. And, once he left the military, he wasn't getting the same amount of paycheck that he was used to getting. And I guess Tammy was upset with him a lot. So he told his mom, I'm going to divorce her. The house is in my name. Everything is pretty much in my name. I'm going to keep my son and she can go off and live her best life. But I'm sick of it and I'm tired of it. And then next thing you know, he gets cremated. And what made it worse was that Joyce shows up to the funeral and, Tammy is acting like a regular widow, like she's crying and all of this stuff, but Joyce is kind of like peeping game. And she was frustrated because Rich, I keep going because she called him Richard, but they was calling him Rich. But She ends up saying that her son told her he did not want to be cremated, that they had lengthy conversations about it and he always wanted to be buried. But the way that Tammy had it set up was that after the memorial service or the funeral, they were going to cremate him, and they did. And Tammy was able to cash in on 2 life insurance policies with that, and she was also selling off his stuff so quickly. The both life insurance policy were $150,000, so she made away with $300,000, and so Joyce is still kind of peeping Tammy, but she doesn't really have any like concrete evidence to say that Tammy, harmed her son or did this to her son. And with his body being cremated, it wasn't like they had time to do an autopsy on him. So she kind of just let it go. Like I said, a lot of people were distraught with the death of Rich. Bo in particular, aka James, was heartbroken. He was heartbroken, and he was already deciding that he wanted to leave the military. So the year of 2002 comes along, and in December of 2002, he gets a call from Tammy, and she's like, hey, do you want to move in with me and Christian? And he's like, all right, bet, because he was having difficulty finding housing. So he moves in with Christian. We end up meeting this guy named Mike. Mike is James's friend, and he also knew Richard, aka Rich, and everyone was like, oh, this seemed to be like the best thing for like them. Like Christian was happy to have James be at the house. Tammy was happy to like have James be at the house. And their relationship was strictly like big sister, little brother. There was nothing sexual happening. We end up finding out that James ends up giving Tammy all of his personal information, like his social security card, his birth certificate, like all his important documents. He ends up giving to her to put in the family safe because he trusted her so much and he felt like this was a great opportunity for them. He never suspected her of any like foul play or using any of that information in a fraudulent way. So as James, Christian, and Tammy are living together, people are starting to peep some things about Tammy. And so Mike, which is James's friend, starts to explain how it just seems like at times Tammy would just get ghosts. Like she would just go out with her boyfriend for like weeks at a time or go hang out with her friends and partying for weeks at a time and just leave Christian with James without like telling them what she was doing. We find out at the time that Tammy was a 911 dispatcher and James had found a job being basically the doorman or a bouncer at a bar. But basically Tammy was a bird and everybody came before her child. And so she really didn't prioritize Christian. If it was a man, it was before Christian. If it was her friends and having a good time, it was before Christian. So it was just a pretty messed up situation. So then we fast forward to 2004 and we have James and Tammy at the house kicking it. And Tammy's in her feelings because her and her boyfriend got into a fight. So she want to get drunk. So she makes this thing called a toucan bomb. I ain't never heard of it. I don't even know what toucan is. Okay. I guess it's some type of alcohol, but they pretty much had Red Bull, and you know how they were doing a slingshot where you put it was a shot glass that you drop in your drink and you drink it. And they were doing that. And James basically said like they got drunk. And he said, you know what? I'm going to just go up to the bedroom and go, it's time for me to go to bed because I'm drunk out of my mind. So he gets in bed, and then when he wakes up the next morning, he's like, okay, I'm still effed up. Like his head is hurting. He's feeling dizzy. He's feeling dazed. And it's to the point where he's crawling to the bathroom because he's like, you know what? I gotta get to work. I gotta find a way to get to work. So next thing you know, he butt booty ball naked, passed out in the bathroom. And Christian, I think at the time was probably like maybe 10 or maybe 11, finds him sprawled out, in the bathroom. He's a child. He's freaking out. He calls 911. They get James to the hospital. He at the hospital, and they think James might be a drug addict. So they're doing all these tests, but they coming back inconclusive, and they just pretty much chalk it up to maybe he had like alcohol poisoning. But James ends up being like, I've never been that drunk before in my life or felt that way in my life. So he was like, that was a scary feeling. The show then jumps to June 30th, 2005, and Bo aka James, and Tammy are at the house kicking it again, and they decide to get drunk again, and they get wasted. Okay, they get wasted, and he passes out. But he passes out in his bedroom. Next thing you know, he waking up. His room is filling with smoke. Like his desk caught on fire. It's crazy. And somehow he's able to like crawl his way out of the house onto the lawn, and he's like gasping for air, and somebody was able to call 911. Mind you, Christian wasn't there. He was actually at a friend's house, and Tammy wasn't there either. She had left like after they were drinking. And so he's breathing hard. He's like choking on fumes and all of that stuff, but he ends up in the hospital, and they think either he got really drunk and knocked over a candle, and that set the house on fire, or his PlayStation 2 overheated and caused like an electrical fire. But either way, James is like, you know what? It's time for me to leave this house, because he was already dealing with some challenges like PTSD and depression, and he was going to counseling for it. But he noticed that when he gets around Tammy, he has a tendency to like overdrink. So he's like, you know what? It's time for me to get out this house. Christian remembers that his mom really wasn't that mad about the fire. Like, she was mad for like 2 seconds where she was like, James tried to burn down my house, but then she got over it. And so he never picked up on it, but like Christian just noticed that like his mom, her anger just went away within like 30 seconds. Like, she wasn't that mad about it. 2006, he decides to move out. And so Christian and Tammy end up moving into a 2-bedroom apartment, and James ends up moving into another apartment for himself. And what sucks is that Christian's saving grace was James. Like, Christian talks about how my mom would just leave me in the house. And she said, at least when I was living with James, I knew what time he would get home. And that gave me comfort that at least I knew once he got home, I was home with an adult that cared about me and that was responsible. But living in the 2-bedroom apartment, my mom would just leave and I would just be at the house by myself. I couldn't go play with my friends. I was feeding myself. I didn't have any time for extracurricular activities. I was just home alone. And he was like, it was scary. He was like, I would go and run into the closet, call my grandmother, Joyce, and just cried to her on the phone. And Joyce would say, I would try to comfort him. If I was in town, I would come stay with him. But when I was outside of town, all I could do was just talk on the phone with him and try to calm him down. And around 7th grade is when Christian said he checked out. He said up until 6th grade, I was like a honor roll student. After 7th grade, I was over it. I checked out. I was being very rebellious. I got suspended for fighting. He was like, at this time, me and my mom were always fighting. Like, I was just over her. I was tired and sick of her. So everything was a fight. And the saddest thing about it was because James was no longer in the house and his only way to have a relationship with Christian was to go through Tammy. And James was trying to distance himself away from Tammy because he felt like Tammy would cause him to drink more, that their relationship suffered very badly because they were no longer in communication with each other. And I felt so bad for Christian because it was just like he really had nobody. He really had nobody other than James, but James had to do what was best for him at the time, which was get away from Tammy. So it's the summer of 2009, and Tammy and Christian are still in this 2-bedroom apartment. One day, out of the blue, Christian says Tammy pops up with these 2 people that look like drug addicts, and then later on we find out they meth heads, move into their apartment. Their names are Sean and Michelle. Christian was like, Michelle was very nice to him. She had 2 kids of her own, but Sean terrified him, and for good reason, because Sean was threatening the mess out of little Christian. Christian was still only in 7th grade, and you got this grown man threatening to like pow him and slit his throat from ear to ear over the smallest offenses. Christian even gave the example of where he accidentally bumped into the car while Sean was like getting stuff out of the car, and Sean comes out of the car with a golf club telling him he was gonna beat him to death. So like Christian is terrified. On top of that, because of Sean and Michelle moving into the apartment with them, again, it's just a 2-bedroom apartment. They kick him out of his room, and now the mom is like, either you can sleep on the couch or you can sleep in my room. And he was like, I hated them. I would hate them too. I would hate my mom too. Because, girl, one, you don't be around. Now it seems like you're a drug addict. You doing drugs with these 2 meth heads you brought up into this house. And then you kick me out and put me on the couch. You are trash. You are a trash parent. Okay? So Christian is over it. He is over it. They then introduced this guy named Detective Michael. He used to be a detective, but now he's retired. So we meet Detective Michael. He was in the force for 20 years, but the last 14 years he worked as in the financial crimes department. And pretty much they are honing in on Tammy. They have been getting a lot of complaints about somebody committing credit card fraud and like scamming and all of this stuff. And their main suspect. It is suspect, but I was about to say something else. Their main suspect is Tammy. They find out that Tammy been writing bad checks from her construction job. So we find out, before we found out this information, is that James had quit his job being a bouncer, and Tammy had quit her job working as a 911 dispatcher and started to be an office manager at this construction company where she got James a job. So Tammy was in charge of the books at the construction company. Well, Tammy was writing out like these miscellaneous checks and giving them to Sean and Michelle to cash them to get money. And people had started to peep game, and she got fired from the construction job because money kept going missing, but they couldn't find it. And they pinpointed that it was her because they were like, you the only one that is in control of the books. Now, around July 2009, James decided it was time for him to move back to Alaska. The construction company business wasn't going well, and they had a lot of layoffs, and he was one of the people that got laid off, and he was really struggling trying to find a job. So he called his parents, and they said, you know what, come back to Alaska. Why don't you go and finish getting your degree and then start from there? And he said, okay, bet, I'm going to do that. So he ends up telling Christian and Tammy, hey, I'm thinking about moving back to Alaska, and I just wanted to let you guys know. Christian was definitely sad about it, but he understood why he was moving back. Tammy, on the other hand, was acting kind of funny, and Christian brought up how one night in the apartment, he noticed Michelle, Sean, and Tammy having a conversation. And he was like, his mom was acting so sporadic. And this is when he finds out that like his mom is doing drugs, and like it might be into some bad things, because what they find out of when it comes to like the financial fraud situation, she was stealing people's information in the apartment complex that they were living in, like stealing driver's license, like taking out things in people's names, taking credit card information. She was just doing a lot. And we find out that it was to feed her drug habit. Okay. And so Christian notes that that night when he saw Sean, Michelle, and his mom talking about James going to Alaska, she was just being weird. And he was like, at that point, he realized that was no longer his mom, because he had never seen her act that way before, and it scared him. Now it's time for James to get ready to move to Alaska. So he has like a packing party, and Sean, Michelle, Tammy, and Christian are all helping him pack. In the middle of it, I think Sean actually left while they were packing, but they were able to pack up all his stuff. They actually went out and got food afterwards and played pool. And then Christian said they left the house. They told, Christian and Tammy told James, hey, we'll be back in the morning to come pick you up to take you to the airport so you can fly out and go back home to Alaska. So everything seems to be going good. And then it's nighttime falls, we're good. Then next thing you know, James hears like this banging noise, like do 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 at his door. And he's like, what? And so he opens the door and bow. and the screen go black. And I said, oh my God, what happened? Like the person isn't sitting here in front of me, but I'm just like, what happened? So it's the next day. It's August the 3rd, 2009. And Christian and Tammy go to James's place to be like, hey, like they're knocking, he's knocking on the door, but James is not coming to the door. And Christian is like, well, I know sometimes he's like a heavy sleeper, so I kept knocking, but he never came to the door. So then Christian noticed that his mom is kind of acting weird. Like she's just being weird. She being mad weird. And so they get into the car, and then eventually Tammy decides to call the office manager of the apartment complex, and they go to James's house. And when they open the door, it is like a pool of blood, like just blood everywhere. And so the office manager shuts the door, and she calls 911, and they come to the house, and James is in his bed with his skull basically bashed in with a broken jaw. He messed up, okay? And so they get him into the car, to the ambulance, and they take him to the hospital. His family actually, like his mom and dad actually flew down from Alaska to Colorado to check up on him. And it was bad. It was bad. Like he was basically a zombie. That's how bad the bash, his head trauma was. Like it was bad. And then the pictures didn't make it any better. I said, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And the police tried to write it off as like James was just drunk and he hit his head. But what we end up finding out is that his father had been in law enforcement for 40 years and was like, I know what a crime scene look like, and this is what this is, and y'all not gonna tell me my child. So he actually goes into James's apartment, and he had a camcorder, and I think he also had pictures. So the dad actually told the wife, the mom, to stay outside, and he basically started to basically take pictures and record as if it was a crime scene, because he just felt like something was not right. So then we finally have Tammy telling Christian, oh, James is in the hospital. And it was so sad because Christian was recounting what he saw James in the hospital, and he was just like, that was not my beau. That was not my big brother. That was not the person that took me on all his errand runs, that taught me how to play video games. That was not my father figure. He was a zombie. He was a vegetable. He didn't even remember me. Like he was just Christian. When I tell you his mom is trash, because Tammy took Christian through so much trauma. That boy went through so much trauma because of his mom. So he is like, that's not my guy. That's not my guy. But then Christian started to notice things where he was like, something ain't right about this whole entire situation. Like I said, Christian is kind of putting two and two together that something about this situation isn't right, especially when he goes back to the apartment with Sean and Michelle and his mom. He notices this baseball bat that he's never seen before, and then he notices James's Xbox, because he's like, oh, my brother, while Sean is playing the Xbox, he's like, oh, my brother has the same Xbox, because it had a tape on, a sticker on it for, I think he said God of War or God of Warhammer or something like that. And Christian ends up saying Sean kind of just brushes him off. But at the time, he's only 12 or 13, and the dots are connecting, but they connecting slowly. So while James is at the hospital, Tammy is by his side, frantically, hoping that he gets better, telling the parents of James, I'll do anything to help y'all, trying to make sure that she doesn't incriminate herself. So then it fast forwards to September 2009, and it's 2 months after James got attacked. And more fraudulent complaints about somebody committing fraud and stealing people's money keeps coming into the police office. And now what they're figuring out is that it's this one apartment complex that keeps getting hit with fraud, and that is where Tammy, Michelle, and Sean lives. And so we end up getting more information about Sean and Michelle. We find out that they are in fact meth heads, drug addicts, and that they were homeless. And Tammy basically promised them they could come stay with her. I guess excuse me, y'all. Thank you if you said bless you. They could come stay with her rent free if they did whatever she said. She was very manipulative. So then Tammy ends up calling Joyce. before she ends up getting arrested 2 months later, telling Joyce that like she's paranoid, that she feels like she's being watched. And granted, she had a right to be paranoid, because like in November of 2009 she ended up getting arrested. So she ends up getting arrested because they link her to all the fraud cases that are happening and the complaints that people have been filing. And so Joyce gets power of attorney and full custody of Christian. So while she's in the apartment going through trying to pack Christian up, she stumbles upon these documents, and it was a life insurance policy on James. It was a 10-year-old life insurance policy, and it was for $150,000. And Tammy had been paying the premium of the policy with the stolen credit cards that she was taking from people and putting in her name and all of that stuff. So next thing you know, she decides, the grandmother decides, Joyce decides to tell the police, and the police contacts James's parents, and they're like, James don't know nothing about no life insurance policy. But the way that she was able to do the life insurance policy, remember when James moved in with Tammy and Christian in 2002, he gave Tammy, his social security card, his birth certificate, all his personal information to put in the family safe. So she took this life insurance policy out on him back when he first moved in 2002. So Joyce decides to call one of Tammy's brothers. So she calls Tammy's brother, and the brother actually gives her like a tape recording of a conversation that Tammy's mom and her boyfriend had, where the mom was like, the boyfriend was like, I heard Tammy was living with some black guy. And the mom was like, oh yeah, James, like he cool or whatever. And she was like, you want to know something crazy? And the boyfriend's like, what? Tammy tried to get Phil to kill him, get my son to kill him for $25,000. And the boyfriend's like, no, never. And the mom ends up saying like, Tammy can do some of the most evilest stuff like you could ever dream of. She is not to be trusted. So we find out that pretty much, like I said, Tammy been trying to kill James for years, since 2002. Well, actually, when the fire happened in 2004, but she been trying to take him and send him on to the upper room since then. So the police actually get in contact with the brother. His name is Phil, and he basically tells her that him and Tammy were at the bar. It was earlier on when James was living with them, and pretty much she ends up propositioning her brother to help her, take out James for the life insurance policy. And she basically was like, oh, I'm going to put like methamphetamines in his drink and go about my day. And the brother didn't agree to the plan, but he never reported it. I think he need to be liable, because how does your sister tell you that she's plotting on killing somebody and you don't go to the police, but you don't partake in it? Craziness. So in 2004, when James ended up being so sick that like they had to rush him to the hospital, it's because Tammy put methamphetamines in his drink. And then when the house caught on fire, she set the house on fire, hoping that it was going to burn this man alive. Craziness. Basically, in 2014, she was convicted in May 13, 2015. They said Tammy was found guilty for first-degree attempted murder on James Bowden and conspiracy. Sean, we find out, was the one that knocked him upside his skull. He pled guilty to first-degree attempted murder and received 26 years a sentence. And then Michelle was found guilty for first-degree burglary and received a 15-year sentence. And then currently they say Tammy is serving 48 years in prison. She has never been charged for the wrongdoing or killing of her husband, Richard Fritz Jr. And the crazy thing about it is when Christian said he saw that his mom was acting out of order when she found out that James was leaving, it was because she felt like she was missing her chance to be able to cash in on her life insurance policy that she had on him because he was moving to Alaska. I said, that's nasty work. That is nasty work. I mean, at least the episode ended positively in the sense of like present day Bo, aka James, and Christian have a very strong relationship. We end up actually seeing the full call that we see in the beginning of the episode where they took out where it was like a collect call from the prison, and she is acting like she is not in jail for attempted murder. That is how that lady is acting on the phone. Very casual about like, I need to go get some new clothes. Like I need to do this, they don't have this and this in here. And Christian is just kind of like, when she got sentenced, I was relieved because now that meant I could start a new life. I didn't have to have her be a part of my life. And he was like, even if she gets out, I don't even think I want her around my family. We find out that he did join the military. I think he's actually in the Navy. And he said it was because of his father and it was because of James that he joined the military. We find out that when James moved back to Alaska, nobody expected a lot of him because he legit was basically like a vegetable. Like he really didn't have all his cognitive functions. He had to go to speech therapy, physical therapy, but the doctors were actually very impressed with him. He said the way that what helped him was learning how to play on his Xbox. He like downloaded Assassin's Creed, and because Assassin's Creed has like puzzles in it, it helped him like, I guess it caused his brain to actually like work. So he said, I moved up here in 2009 and by 2010 I was taking college classes, but he did say that he does have like some like memory gaps, that he does not remember anything. But he said honestly this whole entire situation has like changed him. He was like, I still go to counseling because I'm gonna need it. I'm gonna need to fight these demons of like someone trying to kill me for the past couple of years. But he said like the situation calmed him down. He's not as like, I guess, angry as he used to be. So I guess that was like the positive he took away from it. That like he said, like a phoenix, I'm rising from the ashes. So yeah, lady was crazy, okay? Like, and it's sad that they'll never know that she probably did in fact, because my thing is like, she probably found out that man wanted to divorce her, like murdered him, and then cashed in. That's what he did. That's what she did. She murdered him and cashed in on his life insurance policy. But they can't link her to that because she had him cremated. Mess. But let's move on to episode 4. So the last episode of this season is called The Lethal Landlord, and it opens up, we're in Seattle, Washington, and we see these TikTok videos, and it's of these teenagers who are like down at the pier, and they see this suitcase on these bed of rocks. So they decide, you know what, let's go let's go open it. So they open it, and this foul smell comes out of it, and they're all like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It might be a body in here. So they call the police. The police come out there. At first, they just thought it was like a prank. But then as they started to look at the suitcase, they find a trash bag and it has a severed foot in it. And so they said, oh, this is a crime scene, okay? And as they got the coroners coming out there, they end up unfortunately finding 2 severed heads. And the victims' names are Austin and Jessica. Now, what's crazy is I think I remember seeing this video, but I didn't have a TikTok at the time, so I think I saw it on Twitter, but I didn't pay it any mind. But this is trippy. So we end up meeting Austin's mom. She says when she found out, she was at home with her boyfriend at the time. He was watching the news and she told her boyfriend, change the channel. I hate the news. Like everything is always bad news. They then get like a knock at the door, and the boyfriend opens it up, and the police are like, we need to speak to you. And they inform her that unfortunately Austin had passed away. And she was like, well, how did he die? And they tell her like, oh, they found him outside. They don't give her the gruesome details off rip about how they found him. They just tell her that he died outside. So she's devastated and distraught. And she gives us like a history of who Austin was, like based off of his personality. They say, he was very jovial. He would give the best like hugs. He was just a really nice guy. And then we also find out that Austin was also her firstborn. So we then have Jessica's aunt, and she pretty much says the same, how Jessica was kind-hearted and a nice person. Her family worked in like adult care, so she was like, they would really like, Jessica was nice enough to like talk to the people, paint their nails, like really bond with them and be patient with them. So like she was just a different type of person. We then meet their friend Chris, and Chris basically lets us know they was all meth heads. They was meth heads. And so we get more about Austin's meth addiction, where the mom pretty much says she had to kick him out at 16 because she had other children, and he was just like, he was doing a lot. She was like, they tried to send him to rehab, he would do fine, and then he would get kicked out. He was just very emotional, and he just didn't know how to really like control his emotions, so he turned to the drugs. They Jessica's aunt ends up saying how like addiction runs in their family, so it was sad to see it happen to Jessica, but not uncommon because that's what happened in their families. So Jessica and Austin meet when Austin is like in his early 20s and Jessica's like in her mid to late 20s. And so they hit it off, and they are like, they locked in, okay? And so their friend Chris, who lets us know that they was meth heads, he pretty much was like Jessica loved the fact that Austin was her man, and she always lets you know that Austin was her man, and Austin was proud to be her man. So they were like, they was, a drug couple, but they was locked in. Now Austin ends up moving in with Jessica. They end up becoming homeless after Austin and her move in because they was just getting high in the house and not paying rent, and they were looking for places to stay. Jessica ends up saying like, I would not allow them to stay with me because Austin had a reputation of stealing, and I didn't want that around me. Lo and behold, Austin's aunt, who is like his mom's sister, she's also an addict, but she's actually at the time living with this guy named Mike Dudley. He has a home, and he normally rents it out to those who are struggling with addiction. So she tells them like, hey, come, like, I told Michael about you. Y'all can come stay with us. He says it's cool. So they move in with Michael and the aunt. And so the house has 3 rooms. There's a yellow room that they rent out. There's a blue room. And then Michael has his room. Jessica and Austin were staying in the blue room, and they were happy. They had a roof over their head. It was a warm and clean house. Michael let them bring in their cat, so they were happy about it, and things seemed to be going well. Then we meet one of Mike's old roommates, and her name is Shelly. So it goes back to 2018, and we meet Shelly. We find out that she's a psychologist, and at one time she was living in Switzerland, and then she decided she wanted to move back to America, and she needed a place to stay. She had a bunch of job offers, but she also was bringing her dogs with her, Ringo and Pepper. And so she went on Airbnb, and she found Michael, and she's like, okay, this seems like a picturesque type of place to stay. They have the chicken coop out front. The house is nice. I'm going to see if he would allow me to bring my dogs with me. And Michael's like, I bet. Come bring your animals. So she comes into the house. She says how the house was nice. It was tidy. Michael seemed like a cool dude. He was just kind of nerdy and geeky. And then he had this little dog that followed him everywhere named Duke. And so she was happy because she was like, okay, this really means he's an animal person. And so it got to the point where they developed a friendship. Michael even decided to like drive Shelly to some of her job interviews. And she said on their ride, they used to get into really cool conversations. And she realized that, okay, he's kind of a pretty smart kind of guy. So then one night it was, I guess she was like walking her dogs with Michael. And then next thing you know, Michael gets a phone call from a neighbor that's letting him know that Duke got hit by a car. It was like a hit and run. The person didn't even stop. And they were like, sorry for your loss. So he goes to the road, and they find Duke, and Duke is dead. Duke is dead. And so Shelly notices that Michael is in shock because Duke was basically like Michael's shadow, and he was just in shock. He decides to go to sleep with the dog for like 2 or 3 nights. And Shelly, being a psychologist, is like, I could tell like this is some very complex grief, but I tried to urge him to like, hey, now it might be time for us to bury him out back, have a memorial or cremate him. And Michael's like, I'm not ready to let him go. And he puts Duke in the refrigerator. So he basically froze the dog to death. The dog is already dead. He just froze him. He froze the body in the refrigerator, and it freaks Shelly out. So we fast forward to 2019, and Shelly has already like moved out, found a place and everything, but her and Michael are still friends. She finds out that her father is sick, and so she's like, okay, I need to get to Kansas to go be with my dad to make sure he's all right. But it was so short notice, she didn't know who could watch her pets, so she asked Michael, and he's like, okay, bet, you just got to give me like $50 a night. And she's like, okay, you got it, bro. And so she drops off her dogs. Her dogs' names are Ringo and Pepper, and like things seem to be going great. By this time, Jessica and Austin are staying at the house. Next thing you know, she gets a phone call from Michael that Ringo and Pepper ran away. And Shelly is heartbroken. Like, she's physically sick because those dogs are basically like her children. Like, they were with her in Switzerland and they came back with her to America. Like, she is like, they mean the world to me. So she realizes that she has her dog's chip, and she's like pinging, trying to figure out, like looking at the tracking logs, trying to find her animals. And it's been 2 weeks, and then eventually one of the chips goes off and they find Ringo, and Ringo end up being with like this really nice family. Michael records it and sends Shelly the video, and she's breathing a little bit of sigh of relief, but she's like, where is Pepper? Please find Pepper, Michael, please find Pepper. And Michael tells her, like, we're all looking for Pepper. Me, Jessica, Austin, we're looking for Pepper. So she gets back to Seattle in 2009. It's still 2019, but it's December of 2019. So it's been about like 2 months since she's been back in Seattle, because she was with her dad while he was dealing with that health scare. And she's at the house, and she's just upset about Pepper. Like, she's happy that Ringo is okay, but she is just tore up about them not being able to find Pepper. So then she said Michael gets weird, like mad weird. He walks outside and brings in a chicken. It's a female, like, he had a chicken coop in front of the house. He brings in one of the chickens, and he's like, I killed Pepper. And Shelly is like, you did what? And he's holding the chicken, stroking it like a mad scientist, like, I killed Pepper. And so now Shelly is getting uncomfortable, and she's getting scared, because she's like, okay, why did you kill Pepper? And she's like, cause she killed her baby. So it seems like Pepper might have like eaten or killed one of the baby chicks, and it was giving very much an eye for an eye. And Shelly was like, he wasn't mad at me, but he wanted to let me know what he did, and that terrified me. And she was like, so did you bury Pepper? Like, where is Pepper? And then Shelly was like, Michael was like, me and Austin cremated her. And so Shelly got up from the table because she was terrified. She was scared of Michael, because now she's like, I don't know if he gonna snap on me. She packed her bags, called herself a Uber, and she was like, I was done with Michael after that. October 2019, and Austin and Jessica are still living with Michael. And they're both going increasingly like weary and nervous around him. They liked, to a certain extent, living with Michael because they had their own room. Their cat was allowed to stay there. But Michael had like these odd rules. And on top of that, he was always watching them. He had cameras everywhere. Austin's mom even talks about how she came to visit them and only stayed for 30 minutes. And she could only come because they had to ask Michael, and he said it was okay. So she left. Austin ends up telling his mom about how Michael unalived this dog in front of him, and it was a puppy, and just left it out there. And I said that was his way of asserting his dominance, because there's no way, what the puppy do to you, sir, for you to do some mess like that? So Austin's mom was like, well, if he's doing stuff like that, maybe y'all need to leave. But again, they are drug addicts, so they don't really have money like that to be moving. They're in and out of jobs. And we find out from Jessica's aunt that word on the street was that Michael was a crackhead and a meth head. And he was using, like, manipulating the people that lived around him to do like odd jobs for him, so like stealing car parts or stealing cars and stealing in general. And if you lived there, you had to follow his rules, because he had kind of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality, where he was very nice and like that's what he wanted to present, but behind closed doors he was like a terrorist to everybody that lived in that house that didn't follow his rules. So not Michael. So Austin and Jessica end up telling their friend Chris that, hey, if something bad happens to us, Michael did it. And next thing you know, they go missing. And can't nobody find them. But for the most part, nobody thought it was a big deal because they have a drug addiction problem. Austin's mom was like, we're used to Austin like not picking up the phone and going ghost, or like selling his phone and us having to purchase him a new phone. But what really made them worry like something bad happened is that Jessica didn't pick up her phone. And they were like, Jessica always picked up the phone. So something was definitely wrong. So then we fast forward to June 2020. It's 2020, June 2020. And they find another suitcase 7 miles away from the original dumping site that the TikTok was about. And the lead prosecutor, his name is like Ray, he pops in and was like, they had to talk to the detective that was over it. His name was James. And they found out that once they DNA'd those body parts, that it was in fact Jessica's, and that this was linked to the same case. With their forensic and understanding, they found out that Jessica was shot 4 times, but they could never find Austin's torso, or they hadn't found Austin's torso during this time span at this point. So the family was distraught. The crazy thing about it was that they were about to put out a missing persons report. I think a day after the suitcase was found, and then they got the knock at the door about, unfortunately, what happened to Jessica and Austin. And everybody was heartbroken to know that their loved ones were first, harmed in such a way where they were unalive, to them being dismembered was a lot. So then we have Austin's dad, Dean, and the mom going to Michael's house being like, have you seen my kids? Like, what happened to my kids? Like, why would they end up like this? Like, what happened, Michael? Okay. And this is right around the time when everyone finds out how Michael had a meth and a drug addiction. He had a meth and a crackhead addiction. I call him he a meth head and a crackhead, but y'all know what I mean. He was addicted to hard drugs. And so the dad is like, what happened? And so Michael ends up saying that like they both rushed out my house and they moved out. But the dad notices Austin's clothes in a trash bag inside the house, like near like and then I think he also saw like his clothes at the at one of the, what is it called, y'all? A trash can. And he was like, those, and he went down to the police station and told him what he saw. And they were like, are you sure those were his clothes? And he's like, I know those are my son's clothes because I bought those clothes. I know what I saw. So now they're like, okay, they're getting the ball rolling and starting to put the pieces together. So then they start canvassing the area, and they go to one of the neighbors' house, and the neighbor is like, oh, are y'all here because of the incident that happened on June the 9th, 2020? And they were like, what happened on June the 9th? And the lady said they heard shots fired and screaming and someone asking for help. And then they called 911 saying that they heard gunshots outside and someone screaming for help. So they go to Michael's place. Michael's not there. And the police were like, there wasn't enough evidence for them to like enter the residence or get a warrant to enter the residence, so they just kind of left it alone. That does not make sense to me. If you, girl, what? Okay. So then they end up getting Jessica's phone records. And the last time her phone went off was in Michael's home. So they know that's the last place she was before she went missing. So that's when it goes back to June 19th, 2020, when the TikTok video came out and it like blew up. And so it seems like the pieces of the story are slowly coming together for the police department, and they end up getting a hot tip from a witness. So the witness ends up seeing the TikTok blow up, and she says decides to speak to the detectives. And she says that she moved in after the whole situation between Michael, Austin, and Jessica. She says, I moved in. We find out she also suffers with drug addiction, and she like is a prostitute. And the lady also had she used to steal a lot. But she moved in with Michael, and she could tell the night that she moved in that something had happened between him and Jessica and Austin. She said she did not know them, but she knew of them. Like she had met them like one time. And she said she could tell that Michael and them had been into it because his clothes were disheveled, and both of his glasses were cracked. So she knew he had been in a fight. So she was supposed to move into the blue room, the same room that Austin and Jessica were in. So she goes in, and it's a heap of clothes, and she sees a bloody hand sticking out of the clothes. And so she backs away from the door, shuts it, and goes sits on the couch. And she's terrified. She's scared. So she doesn't even make a big deal about it. She said Michael was like, do you have he was like, I need to go move some things. I need to keep cleaning. I need to do all this stuff, because he ends up taking everything out of the room and then repainting. It smells like bleach. Like he bleaches everything down. And so she asks him like, what happened? She said and Michael ends up saying that the boy, she said the boy misfired, but I didn't. So basically saying that like they got into a scuffle, and I guess a gun went off, and I don't know if Austin was trying to protect him and probably was trying to protect him and Jessica from Michael, and then Michael ended up being quicker than them and unalived both of them. So it was crazy. So then now that the cops have this story, they're like, okay, we got enough to arrest Michael, because they get the story about what happened on June the 9th when the neighbors heard the shots. And now you have the witness saying this about, I moved in, I see a bloody hand. Then you have the dad saying, yo, I saw my son's clothes at the base of like the stairs. Like something is up. Like, he did something to my baby. So they get Michael in the room. Michael starts lying. Michael starts blaming everything on Austin, saying that he was mad aggressive and Jessica was in on it, that they was stealing from him and he wanted them out of the house and all of this stuff. And then the police kind of get tired of him talking, and they're like, sir, we found bullet holes in the bed frame and in the wall. Like you cleaned the house, like you cleaned that room, you repainted it and everything, but you didn't get rid of all the evidence. And even though they couldn't locate the gun that he used, they were able to trace that the bullets came from the same gun. So they know you shot it, sir. So he ends up getting arrested, and they end up, I think, finding another dump site. And luckily, that other dump site, they were able to locate the other part of Austin's body, because for the longest, they couldn't find it. They could not find it. And it was like tearing the mom up, but she was so happy once they did find it. And so when they went to court, pretty much, Michael was trying to act like he didn't understand why he was in court. He was trying to play like the old sick man, like he doesn't know what's going on. But then they got him because they found, like, with him having his phone on him, he basically they pinged his phone to all of the dump sites. Like, he pretty much, like, didn't leave his house only for that day for him to dump those suitcases. So that even more incriminated him. So basically, Michael was charged on on April the 7th, 2023. He got sentenced to 46 years in prison and basically won't be eligible for parole till 104 years old. He dying in jail, as he should, because there was no reason to hurt them people that way. And then, like I said, in August of 2023, they were able to locate the remaining remains of Austin's body, and they popped up in like some forestry area in Seattle. And so the mom was ecstatic because, it's messed up that her child was harmed in this way, but she just felt so... It ended the story. Like, they got all of his body parts back so that they could, like, bury him the correct way and then move on with their lives. But that man was crazy. That man was crazy. This whole entire series is crazy. And that's why it's so scary to like move in with people you don't know. And it's also crazy that like you could know people and they still will harm you. Cause episode 1, that lady knew that girl. Well, I mean, she only knew it when they moved in once, like for a month. But they were friends for 25 years and she was purposely harming her. Then you have the story that I just told you, we talked about for the first one with, burning down the house. She knew that man and she tried to kill him for the past 10 years. Took out a life insurance policy and everything. People are horrible. People are horrible. So yeah, y'all, that is it. That is all. Remember to be bravely authentic and definitely hop down in them comments below and share your thoughts with me. And I'm out, y'all. Deuces.